How to make millions with Transmog, a no BS guide. Let us begin. Okay, so we want to make gold with Transmog, and a lot of you guys actually requested this video within the Discord under video request. Starting off with Transmog, it is a long-term game. If you want gold now, like right now, then you literally are playing the wrong game. That being said, that is a word of caution for anyone who wants to get into Transmog and want immediate returns. Transmog, long game. If you want to make millions with it, you can. It's going to take a long time in order to do. It's a long time prep. That being said, if you want to continue with this video, then please do. Transmog really does depend on your server. What do I do in order to actually do it? Now, I picked a high-pop server like 𝐆𝐀𝐿, mainly due in part, the more people, the more potential buyers, as well as with 𝐆𝐀𝐿, it is a RP server, so more people are wanting more unique models, more characters to be more unique. And that being said, that is prime for the Transmog market to be good, because people want their characters to look unique. There's tons of people, and the server really does matter. So a higher pop server really does help with selling. It's not to say that you can't make gold with low to medium pop servers, it's just a lot more difficult. Will bring us on to our next part of Transmog. Now, with Transmog, you are basically looking to get a wide variety of items. Now, a common census that a lot of us gold makers who do guides on this do commonly say, it is mainly go for 1,000 items, 2,000 items, but more to the point, it's 1,000 to 2,000 items of unique models. It's not all the same item. If you put up 100 shirts, that doesn't equate to the 1,000 items while taking off 100 from that. You need at least 1,000 to 2,000 unique models on the auction house. Now, primarily, this is just a benchmark, a reference that you are to go by, because a variety matters. I take the analogy of a shop. So if you opened a shop and it was a clothing store, you're not going to make a lot of money by selling just blue shirts. Maybe you want black shirts, red shirts, yellow shirts, loads of different varieties, so people have a choice to pick. This makes sense, and that's how we should take the approach towards Transmog, by having a large variety of different types of unique appearances on the auction house at all times. Coming in towards the census of gold making with Transmog, they have low sell rates. This means that a wide variety takes the guesswork out, but also actually increases your chance of sales. Which brings me on to my next point, which is the gold value. Now, most people will say, post everything, or that's something that I did say in the past, and I've changed my views. I do change my views on things, and I go by a threshold of, if it is not over 1,000 gold on my server, I will delete it. Well, vendor it or disenchant it, whatever I feel like for that day. Yesterday I did a load of vendoring for everything because I could not be bothered to DE it all. But realistically, I go for a threshold of 1,000 gold or higher, and then I'll sell those on the auction house. I make sure that I have 2 of the same item on the auction house. If I do have 2 of that item, that's not always the case, especially if you're selling high ticket items. Which brings me on to my next point, is what type of items are you going to sell? Well, the items you sell really does depend on the demand for them. And let's be quite frank, shall we? Vanilla Transmog is generally the best of the selling ones in general. This is because there are tons of unique mogs from loads of the different dungeons and raids, and you can get them from other expansions, but vanilla is something you probably want to start out with. Generally speaking, if you want to get started, I'll list off a couple of dungeons. Stratholme, both entrances, service and main. You can do also RFK, RFD, Zul'Farrak. You can also even do Dire Maul. Now, generally speaking with that, you're going for those unique models. Take Alderman for instance. I primarily go for high ticket items. This is because they're harder to get a hold of. Yes, that is true. However, the yield on them is significantly bigger. So when you do get that sale, you are most likely going to win big. And that's what I generally am going for. I do pick up and sell the 1000 over my threshold. And don't get me wrong, however, I am going specifically for those high ticket items. So like Papal Fez for Alderman, I can go for the Shoveler, I can go for the Miner's Hat of the Deep, the Jinsu Sword, things like that I generally will go for. It's the same thing with Zul'Farrak with the Glorious Leg Plates. I'll go for those and pieces of the Jade Fire set. And then you have things like the Strathhome Militia Shoulder Guards. Those can go from Strathhome on the service entrance, if I remember right. And that is something I generally will go for. Now, overall, when it comes towards selecting a gold farm, you can easily do this by, and I'm going to do a bit of self-promotion right here, Worth It. Just go to Worth It, go to Instances, and go to Transmog. This will give you a nice little benchmark of how much the gold per hour is on Transmog, and then if you want to have a look at the loot tables, you can just go to Open World, Transmog, and then you can see all of the vanilla dungeons here, and you can see all of the special items that can drop from that instance. So if we go over towards Alderman, we can then have a look at this. You see Pendulum of Doom is 2 million gold. I'm going for those high ticket items. If I get any other greens or something to that effect, I will literally put those on the auction house, but it's not my goal. I'm looking for those high ticket items specifically. Now, that's why I want to build up a large variety of those unique models, because they're harder to get a hold of. They yield better once they've sold, and if I have a large variety of them, I'm going to be pulling in regular gold very easily, along with all of the other greens that are over 1000 gold as well. Generally speaking, if you want something other than vanilla, I would immediately go for things like WoD. WoD has great yields when it comes towards gold making, and we did this yesterday. Go back into Worth It, and if we go into my farms, Shattered Hand farm for Transmog is currently at 951,000 gold. If you have a look at the sell rates on these are actually pretty good, like 0.003, and you've got others which are actually pretty good as well. It's just dependent on what you're actually selling at certain sell rates. Now, these are common sell rates for Transmog is 0.005 and stuff like that. It's those types of sell rates which really do help and are very common. So don't be dissuade from the sell rates of those Transmogs. What you want is that large variety at high yield over your threshold, and then place them on the auction house. It's all about rinsing and repeating that process and building up a nice stockpile. This is why it takes such a long time, is getting that variety of unique mogs on the auction house and then resupplying and more farming. But once you've actually built up to that like a decent chunk of unique items, that's why we say 1,000 to 2,000 items on the auction house. That is why you start making quite a lot of bank with it, because people will be buying unique appearances, unique mogs for their characters, and that's primarily why vanilla sells well, because they want those old world mogs for their characters. That being said, you can always use other different types of ones, which are like TBC, Wrath of the Lich King, but it really does depend, and that's why your threshold matters when you're farming up your mogs. Now, you can do raids. I primarily like to do Sunwell, and that is because it provides me with rare, unique mogs as well as recipes. Now, I get this common consensus a lot of like selling recipes, farming recipes, and everything. Treat them as Transmog, because a lot of them are essentially used to create certain pieces of Transmog, and that is something to do. An easier method instead of farming is crafting. Now, this one's an easier one to get into, however there's a lot more competition. because you're farming unique mogs, which are rarer, you are generally going to find that you have a bit more of an edge when it comes towards selling them, because people have to actually physically go out and farm these items and sell them on the auction house. When it comes towards crafting, all you got to do is craft the item if you have the recipe. Things like the Fell Steel Longblade, those ones are a rare recipe, but if you have old world recipes or even just base sets that you can craft at a profit, then you are most likely wanting to do that. When it comes towards transmog, variety still matters, so try and craft all of the ones that are profitable for you. And I generally go with transmog at a 50% markup when it comes towards profitability for transmog. I want to make that yield back by placing them in the auction house that way. When it comes towards everything else, I find that crafted items such as like the Sulfuron Hammer, really rare recipes, actually do help as well. So if you do have those, make good use of them. The most common ones for crafting transmog are, of course, your tailoring, your leatherworking, your blacksmithing. However, the better one of all of them is probably tailoring, to be quite frank, and that is because you can produce shirts. You can also produce a lot of the old school tier gear for really cheap, and the production cost for that, the barrier to entry, is really low. However, that does mean that there is more competition, but it's a good way to get yourself started in that. And that is a literal no BS way. Transmog with tailoring is easy to get into, but you're going to have a lot of competition. The same goes with leatherworking, that's another tier up. And then you've got your blacksmithing, which is one of the most expensive of the ones to actually craft with for transmog. And I would generally just work your way up slowly and steadily into all of that, unless you've got enough gold to get yourself started. With crafted transmog, easy barrier to entry, but it's a good way to get your foot in the door and get a load of unique items on that auction house fairly quickly. Now, the question is, do you pair or anything to that effect? With me, I do crafted transmog and farmed transmog, and I find that the crafted transmog does tend to sell faster, so you can go with that. However, the yield for farm transmog generally tends to be better for me personally when it comes towards gaining that stuff back. So that is something to bear in mind. Would you go for farm transmog or crafting transmog? It would be really interesting to know your thoughts, so put that in the comments down below if you're still watching this video on crafted transmog. Now, the next thing that I would want to cover on this topic is, how long does it take before you start making millions? And honestly, it's going to take you a few months. That's why I said it's a long game. You're going to need to build that variety up, which really does mean that you're going to be farming for a long time. You're going to be crafting for a long time. Crafting is the faster way of doing it because you just have a lot of baseline ones if you just level up your professions. However, with all of the high-end stuff, you need to get those rare recipes. You need to get those high-ticket items from farming, and it will take you a long time in order to do. That is something to bear in mind. Now, you could always go do a materials farm, but this is a transmog video, so yeah, it's a transmog video, and I warned you at the beginning, it takes a long time to set up, and most people don't have the patience for transmog. It's like they do like 3 hours worth of farming and they think that they can get regular sales like almost immediately. No, that's not how it works. You need a larger variety and it's going to take a longer time span. So looking at it from a longer point of view, this is going to take me like 3 to 6 months, and then I'll stop pulling in bigger amounts of gold than I would farming up other things. Then take that into account before you even start doing transmog farming and selling, because if you want gold now, transmog is definitely not for you. If you wanted to step down from that, it would be battle pet farming, and I do that quite frequently as well. I do a mixture of pretty much everything besides flipping, because I loathe flipping. It's just boring for me. And the last thing I want to talk about for today, TSM with your setup when you're crafting mechanics. We can go into this, and what I generally like to do is keep it very simple when I'm crafting transmog, and that is I I generally go for crafting 1 to 2 of them and keeping them always up on the auction house. So if one sells, there's still always another one on the auction house, just in case it sells again, so I have time to restock. And I do it at my 20% crafting or 50% crafting, depending on the one. And then I will benchmark it off of how much the sell rate is, which for me is usually 0.003. And that's where I like to go with crafted transmog and just build it out that way. You can go with a lower sell rate if you want more variety on the auction house, but that's how I generally like to do it. When it comes towards posting on the auction house, you're mainly going to be competing with other people on your server, so you want to benchmark it off of the historical price, the recent price, and also the crafting cost for you to do it. Now, I generally like to go off of the crafting cost first, and then benchmark it off of the historical and the recent prices as well through that. That being said, it's fairly simple, straightforward. At the end of the day, it is really just a patience game and building up that stockpile, which does take a long time in order to do. So take that into account. And other than that, that is the video request for a no BS guide for Transmog. Have an awesome rest of your day, and I shall see you in the next video, which will be soon.